Why should the average person care?
High level thing is absolutely everything is going to change for the whole world, and including therefore for them and their families. Could change for the better, could change for the worse, depending on the details of how it's done. So for example, everyone could die. This is the classic loss of control scenario, or one version of it. If we do build these superintelligences and we use them to automate all the jobs, and we put them in the military, and we have them giving advice to politicians and so forth, they will eventually have accumulated enough real-world power that they don't need humans anymore. And they're smarter than us, they're more strategic, etc. At that point, we sort of have to hope that they are virtuous, that they have the goals that we wanted them to have, the values that we wanted them to have, etc. And the sort of scary open secret in the AI industry right now is that right now that is kind of just a hope. It's not something that we can be at all confident in. And in fact, there's lots of evidence and arguments that we're not on track to achieve that. So there's lots of reasons, like current AIs, for example, will often lie to people, or they will you tell them to do something and they go do something else and then pretend that they did it, right? So it's an inherently difficult problem to make something that's super intelligent and also has the values and virtues that you want it to have. And it doesn't seem like we're on track to solve that problem. Also, it seems like the sort of problem that you could think you've solved when you haven't actually solved it, right? That's a big reason why this is scary. So for all those reasons, it's possible that we'll end up essentially creating a new species that ends up ruling the world instead of us. And then maybe we go the way of other extinct species in the past that were outcompeted by humans. That's one possibility. There's many more. Even if you're not worried about that and you think that the AIs will be totally controlled, there's the question of who controls the AIs, right? When there's a couple corporations that have made these superintelligences and are using them to automate all the jobs, well, that's a lot of power, It's a lot of money, it's a lot of political power. They'll have the best strategists, the best advisors, they'll think faster. Militarily, the countries that has these AIs will be able to absolutely wipe the floor with all the other countries. The AIs themselves, it's kind of a single point of failure, like central control system where, the CEO of Anthropic, Dario, he coined this phrase, the country of geniuses in the data center. That was his phrase to describe what they're trying to build, I think that's a little bit misleading. I think it would be more accurate to describe it as army of geniuses in the data center, because it's not like it's a bunch of diverse different AIs, living in their different parts of the data center. They're all copies of the same big model, and they're owned by the company. And so they all follow the orders given by the company, right? People should be asking questions of who controls this army or these armies, and what are they going to be doing with them? I think that we could very easily end up in a sort of a situation where some tiny group of people are essentially oligarchs or dictators. And ironically, both of these risks, the loss of control and the concentration of power, are things that people in the industry have been thinking about for decades. Even before the AI industry existed, people thinking about AI were talking and writing about these things. And then part of the founding narrative or the founding myth of DeepMind and OpenAI and Anthropic is these problems are real. So we need to get there first so that we can handle it responsibly. Those are, I think, the big two reasons, but then I can go on. There's lots more reasons as well. So one thing is, World War III, geopolitical conflict. If AI does in fact get incredibly powerful, that's going to change the balance of power between nations. That's going to disrupt a lot of things. That puts us at increased risk of crisis more generally, right? Another one, what about those jobs? You're going to lose your taxi job, but not just the taxi job, for everybody, pretty much. There might be a few exceptions, like people whose jobs for legal reasons are only allowed to be done by humans, but for the most part, everybody should be afraid that their jobs are going to be lost, even if we manage to avoid all the other problems, right?
This narrative has started to emerge, and I've had several interviews on the show where I've interviewed people who are very, very scared and anxious about AI, and these are people that have worked in the industry for sometimes decades.
Yeah.
The counter-narrative coming over the hill is that this is doomerism, that these people are, for whatever reason, just trying to scare people, and that they don't really understand what they're talking about. How do you respond to that sort of counter-narrative? And you must have seen this emerging yourself, especially from people who stand to benefit, dare I say.
Yeah, exactly. This counter-narrative is fairly recent, and it's been pushed by the people who stand to benefit from it, and it's not true. Like these concerns have been around for decades, since before the AI industry existed. They're actually pretty reasonable concerns. Like if you take the companies at their word and imagine that they are in fact going to build superintelligence, Well, it raises a lot of questions, like who's going to control it? Will anybody control it? What about the jobs? These are just kind of obvious implications to be thinking about and worrying about.
Who are you and what's your story?
My name is Gianluca Cutello. I currently run the AI Futures Project, which is a small nonprofit that mostly focuses on forecasting the future of AI. Before that, I worked at OpenAI.
AI forecasting?
Yeah, so think about how industry analysts who work for hedge funds and stuff will make these forecasts of here's, how many cars Tesla will be selling 5 years from now, or here's what the price of electricity will be in 2 years, right? That's forecasting. I was doing that, but specifically focused on AI. The reason I was doing it is because it's incredibly important to see where this is all headed.
Why did you go to OpenAI? What did you do there? What did you observe while you were there? And how did it change your perspective on the future of AI, but also, I guess, OpenAI as a company? And for anybody that doesn't know, OpenAI are the company that produced ChatGPT.
Yeah, so I went to OpenAI in 2022. A large part of what I did there was more forecasting. AI 2027 is a scenario that you may have heard of. I did smaller, lower effort versions of them internally for just internal circulation of here's some guesses as to what the next couple of years might look like. I also worked on evaluations for dangerous capabilities. So, trying to measure the AI's cyber abilities or persuasion abilities or situational awareness. And I also briefly was on a capabilities team doing reinforcement learning to create agents. AI is in fact getting a lot better, and I can say more about why. Scaling laws, deep neural nets, bigger, trained on more data, become more efficient, more competent at those things. I also became a bit more disillusioned with the AI industry. So OpenAI, Anthropic, and DeepMind all had these sort of founding narratives of yes, these risks are real, but we've thought about them and we're going to try to handle them responsibly. And that's why it's important for us to keep doing what we're doing. And I increasingly came to think that these were rationalizations to justify what they were doing rather than sort of deeply guiding their actual behavior, and that when push comes to shove, they'll follow their incentives rather than do what's actually good.
So you're inside OpenAI at the time, and you start to believe that they're following commercial incentives versus the, I guess, social or societal incentives that they founded themselves on. Sort
of. I mean, I wouldn't actually describe it as commercial incentives. I think I would describe it as power-seeking incentives. So, it's true that the companies care a lot about making a lot of money, but especially at the very top of these companies, the leaders, they understand that this is about more than just money. There are these emails that came up in the lawsuit between Musk and OpenAI. A bunch of emails were surfaced in that lawsuit, which you can go read. And in some of them, the founders of OpenAI were talking back in 2017 about how the reason why we made OpenAI was because we were worried that Demis Hassabis at Google was going to become dictator with AGI. Even back then, this is obviously about more than just money. These powerful CEOs are literally afraid that if the other guy gets there first, he might become dictator. And they don't trust each other. And so that's why they are racing as hard as they can so that they're the ones who get there first, so to speak.
Have you met Sam Altman?
Yeah.
And did that shape your opinion of his incentives or why he's doing what he's doing? Because there's a lot, speculated about what his incentives are. I mean, his most recent narrative says for the good of humanity. I think that's what.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing I've learned is don't pay attention to the narratives. What they say to one person is just different from what they can say to some other person at the same time. And what they say in public is a third thing entirely. I think you should judge people by their actions, not by their words.
And why are you no longer at OpenAI?
Largely for the reason that I mentioned. So I became gradually disillusioned with how the company was going to behave. For example, when I first joined in 2022, at least the people I talked to, my colleagues at the company, there was this general sense of of course, we wouldn't actually just build superintelligence as soon as possible. Once we started getting really close, once we started getting to AIs that could maybe automate the AI research process, we would pause and figure out how to make it safe. That was sort of a thing that seemed maybe the median position or something among the colleagues I talked to when I was there when I started, including people like Sam, including the leadership. And then by the time I left, I was oh man, they're really not going to do that, are they? They've sort of, partly because this has become more politicized and they've become bigger and been under more scrutiny, people have started asking, like, why are you doing this in the first place if it's so risky? And so they've pivoted their narrative to being more like, actually, it's not that risky, And so, it seems like they're just going to keep going roughly as fast as they can and hope that they can figure it out on the way.
How did your time at OpenAI come to an end?
I resigned in 2024. I had a nice goodbye party.
What were the reasons you gave for quitting OpenAI?
I thought that we were rationalizing too much and that we needed to think more about what would actually be good for the world. I wanted more freedom to publish. So at OpenAI, as it became a bigger company, it became more of a normal tech company with incentives and a PR department and things like that. And so it started becoming more difficult to publish the sort of research that I was doing. For example, those scenarios that I mentioned, couldn't publish those, right? They're just for internal use. I thought that was a shame because right now, most of the world is kind of asleep at the wheel and doesn't really realize what's going on with AI and doesn't really realize what's coming in the pipeline a couple of years from now. And the companies aren't really incentivized to tell people that much about it. I mean, they say some vague stuff in a sort of hypey way, but, they didn't want me to publish the scenario, for example, laying out like, here's how things might actually look.
I'm super curious as to what it's like being in a company like that when ChatGPT 3 is released. You were there at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was a moment where I think the whole world stood up and realized that this technology was powerful.
Yeah.
And the conversation really began from a society level. Company starts growing super quickly.
Yeah.
Quicker than I think anybody could ever have imagined. And what was it like inside there? What did you see change over that period of time?
I remember one all-hands meeting where Ilya said something like...
Ilya being?
Ilya Sutskever, who was head of research at that time. He said something like, okay, now the world is starting to pay attention. Each of you is going to be the most popular person at every party for the next year. Don't let it get to your head. Focus on the mission. Got to build AGI. The company grew a lot. It already wasn't really feeling like a nonprofit when I joined, but it definitely didn't feel like a nonprofit by the time I left. Lots of new people came in. Ironically, the amount of conversation about superintelligence and the implications of superintelligence arguably sort of went down over time due to this growth, right? So because the company would double and then double again and double again, all these new people were coming in from other parts of the tech industry who hadn't really been thinking about these things and were attracted by the high salaries.